55 kilometers. That's all that separates Iran from the United Arab Emirates. 55 kilometers of water, where 20% of all the oil consumed on the planet every day passes through. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a shipping route. It's the point where the modern world is most fragile, most vulnerable, easiest to break, and very few people know it. Every time you fill up your car's tank, there's a real chance that fuel passed through there, through that narrow, heavily guarded channel, tense to the breaking point for decades. It's a place where a single wrong move could send oil prices skyrocketing around the world in a matter of hours. That's not an exaggeration, it's just math. Before we go on, if you find these kinds of stories as fascinating as I do, make sure to subscribe right now. I post every week, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman, and from there to the Indian Ocean. At its narrowest point, it's just 55 kilometers from end to end. But what's truly amazing is that the navigable lanes, the strips where oil tankers can safely pass, are only 3 kilometers wide in each direction. 3 kilometers, the width of a medium-sized city. Every day, between 15 and 20 million barrels of crude oil, liquefied natural gas, and refined products pass through there, fueling entire economies. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Iraq, Qatar, they all need that channel to export their energy to the world. Without it, there's no way out. And on the other side, watching all of this is Iran. The geography here is brutal in its political harshness. The northern coast of the strait belongs almost entirely to Iranian territory. That means Iran has the technical and logistical capability to complicate, disrupt, or even outright block maritime traffic at the most critical point of the world's energy supply. It hasn't done so completely, at least not yet, but the threat has been hanging over every negotiation, every sanction, every diplomatic crisis in the region for decades. To understand why this matters so much today, we need to pause for a moment on something economists call the substitution cost. If the Strait of Hormuz were closed for just 30 days, the countries that depend on that oil would have to find alternative routes. Those routes do exist, but they're longer, more expensive, and have limited capacity. Saudi Arabia has a pipeline that crosses its territory all the way to the Red Sea. The Emirates built another one that reaches Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, bypassing the strait. But together, those pipelines don't have enough capacity to replace all the flow that goes through Hormuz. The gap between what can be rerouted and what actually passes through the strait is a shortfall that the global oil market couldn't absorb without severe consequences. In 2019, it became clear just how far this tension could go. In June of that year, 2 oil tankers were attacked in the Gulf of Oman, near the entrance to the strait. One of them burned for hours. The images made headlines around the world. The United States blamed Iran. Iran denied it. And while diplomats talked, the price of oil shot up almost 4% in just a few hours. Just out of fear. There hadn't been any real blockade, no sustained disruption of traffic, just 2 damaged ships and the specter of what could come next. That's the psychological power of the Strait of Hormuz. Weeks later, in July of the same year, Iran's Revolutionary Guards seized a British-flagged oil tanker in the strait's waters. They took it to an Iranian port, detained its crew, and kept it seized for months. It was a calculated show of force, a response to the earlier detention of an Iranian vessel by the authorities in Gibraltar, the strait as a bargaining chip, the strait as a message. Here's something worth understanding in depth, because it changes the way you see the world. The oil that passes through Hormuz doesn't mainly go to the United States or Europe, it goes to Asia. Japan receives about 80% of its crude oil imports through that channel. South Korea, around 70%. China, a significant portion of its huge energy demand. India, Taiwan, the Philippines. If the strait were closed for weeks, the first economies to feel it wouldn't be the Western ones, but the Asian ones. And given their weight in global manufacturing, the collapse would spread in a chain reaction across the entire planet. think about what that means for geopolitics. China has a direct and vital interest in keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. The same goes for Japan, which is an ally of the United States, but relies on an energy route that Iran could shut down. Diplomatic talks about sanctions, about Iran's nuclear program, about regional agreements, all of them have that same underlying question with no easy answer. How much can Iran be pressured before the threat to the strait stops being just a threat and turns into action? Now then, could Iran actually block it? Technically, the answer is yes, at least partially and for a while. The Revolutionary Guard has fast boats, coastal missile systems, naval mines, and a military doctrine that has spent years perfecting what's known as asymmetric warfare. In other words, using limited resources to inflict disproportionate damage on a more powerful enemy. They wouldn't need to sink a fleet. It would be enough to sink a large ship in the shipping channel, sow uncertainty with a few mines, or attack 2 or 3 oil tankers for maritime insurance companies to raise their premiums so much that traffic would come to a halt on its own. If this analysis is opening your eyes to how the real world works behind the news, click subscribe and turn on the notification bell. These stories that nobody tells on the news are exactly what you'll find here every week. However, an Iranian blockade would come at a huge cost for Iran itself. Its oil exports, already hit hard by international sanctions, also depend on that route. Closing the strait would be like cutting off your right hand to strike your enemy, and it would also almost automatically trigger a US military response. The United States Navy maintains a permanent presence in the region precisely because of that. The Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain, just a few dozen kilometers from the strait. There are aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines. The capability to forcibly reopen the channel exists, but a war to reopen it would be devastating economically, in terms of human lives and geopolitically for everyone involved. That's the perfect trap of the Strait of Hormuz. No one can close it without destroying themselves, but no one can ignore that it's there, that someone might try, and that the world doesn't really have a working plan B. Historian Michael Clare, an expert in energy resources and conflicts, described it as the bottleneck that turns energy into a weapon. And he's right. The most disturbing thing about all this, what you don't see in superficial analyses, is the following. The world's dependence on the Strait of Hormuz isn't a geological accident or a case of poor planning. It's the result of decades of economic decisions. Oil subsidies and infrastructure built on the assumption that the supply would always be stable. The world developed an energy addiction and deliberately concentrated it in one of the most geopolitically unstable places on the planet. That's not bad luck. It's the accumulated consequence of 1,000 decisions made without looking at this map. But the tension never really goes away. Some years it intensifies and some years it eases, but the structure of the problem remains unchanged. As long as the world keeps consuming oil at the current scale, as long as Iran controls that stretch of coastline, and as long as there are no alternative transport routes capable of truly replacing that flow, the Strait of Hormuz will remain what it is today, the most dangerous place in the world. And most people fill up their gas tanks without even knowing it.